Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we discuss all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring. Welcome back to the Inner Athlete Podcast, the home of youth athlete development in Melbourne. And then we've got Dave back on, is one of our coaches here. And we're going to get really straight into this topic. And we're going to talk about like how a lot of youth athletes at the moment are really taking inspiration from Instagram and social media, from their favorite athletes in terms of how to drive their training programs or what exercises they actually want to do specifically in their training programs. And we want to talk about, the good side of that, which is, I think, it's great because they're more motivated to train. But what are the potential pitfalls from that side?
Yeah, so like you said, I think it's great that kids are getting more excited to try different things out, as they see on like TikTok or Instagram or even on YouTube. I think, it's great that there are people out there who are giving advice and motivation to these sort of kids, but it may even be their biggest downfall at the end of the day.
Yeah, because we get this as coaches from some of the parents here, even from some of the kids as well, saying like, "Oh, I'd love to add this into my program." And one of the things that we notice specifically, a lot of these athletes that they follow are at the top of their game. Usually they're competing on a world circuit, if it's track and field or swimming, or college level, to competing in the Olympics or something like that, and they see their training programs and what specifically they're doing, and they see like, oh, that's a really cool exercise that will help me with X, Y, and Z, which is okay. But we don't realize how many years of training they've actually put into to be able to get to the point to include something like this within their training program. And one of the big things we should definitely understand is assessing whether or not someone needs an exercise like that, first of all. And that's where we, especially with what we do here, we always assess the individual needs. It's inner athlete, everything's individualized to the member or to the athlete in this case. And then we actually build off their skills and repertoire and their exercise library over time as well, following the long-term athlete development model. For those who don't know what that is, it's basically a list of KPIs throughout the chronological? I can't remember now. Chronological, or the training age of the athlete in question.
Biological age.
Biological age, sorry. And usually there's like certain markers when you want to start incorporating certain elements of, strength and conditioning or, components of fitness within their training. And usually you kind of lay that in, and how you execute that is obviously dependent on the maturity of the individual. In terms of maturity, we're talking about like physical maturity, the bone structure, muscle structure.
Yeah, like growth spurts at peak height velocity, making sure like you're hitting certain training goals at different growth periods and things like that.
Correct, yeah. Then also maturity in terms of them being behaviour-wise as well.
Yeah.
Can they take instructions on? Are they likely to goof off? Are they likely to execute the exercise as well? Are they likely to distract others in the gym setting? And we want to make sure that, the exercises that we provide are going to help them develop into becoming more a well-rounded athlete. Then later on down the track, when they're 16, 17, 18, we can double down in their sport. And that's what we've seen is, some of our national level athletes, they're dual sport weapons. It's a really big thing that we're seeing now. You hear about stories of, we've spoken about this before, that, some kids play two sports, maybe a summer and a winter sport, or they'll play two sports concurrently, and they may not be excellent at both sports, but they're pretty good. But later on down the track, they can really double down on that, and that's another topic for another day. But getting back to the exercise selection and the motivation of utilizing, their favorite Instagram influencer or something like that to get motivation or select exercises, we want to build a broad base for the individual. Then later on down the track, we can go more into specificity for their sport, if that's actually required or necessary. And that's probably the biggest thing is it actually required? And 9 times out of 10, sometimes we see really crazy stuff. I was like, who's that shot putter, the gunner? I don't know. So there's a guy that we learned about in university. He did a lot of heavy plyometrics. Like he would do like stair jumps with like a barbell on his back or something crazy, or doing like real like big plyometric exercises, and it was seen as something that was super advanced at the time as well, and he was a world record, and he might have been a javelin thrower, I can't remember. And a lot of people were trying to implement something like that into the training, but they also got to remember he had to build himself to get to that point to withstand all that load, right? And if you see a lot of track athletes or field or court-based athletes doing a lot of plyometric work, they do need to make sure that they have the tissue quality there before they start implementing high amounts and high volumes of plyometric work, because it can lead to potential issues with the remodeling of the tendons and the ligaments can be impaired as a result. Tendonitis issues can flare up. That's why, like with a lot of running, kids that do a lot of running, they can get a lot of plantar fascia, Achilles tendonitis, patella tendonitis, and all these itises. Essentially, it's basically just like an overload and inflammation of those specific sites.
Yeah, I guess to sum all that up, a good analogy is to think of like, if you're a parent and your child's learning to drive, you wouldn't teach them really advanced stuff. So like, you wouldn't teach them how to drive like a NASCAR driver. You like the first day in the car is like, okay, how to hold onto the steering wheel, what's the gas, what's the brake, how to change gears, things like that. All the really basic stuff that we take for granted now. But you look at like a race car rally driver or a NASCAR driver or F1 driver, they know all the really advanced stuff because they had to do the basics first. So I think a really good analogy is to imagine like your elite athletes, they're the really advanced NASCAR rally race car drivers. And yeah, treat your child as like, no, they're just starting off, and eventually they will get to that level where it's required.
Yeah, it's really just building them up slowly over time and just nailing the basics well. Yeah. Start with that, expose them to a large movement patterns as well. Jumping is fine. Being on playgrounds and all that jazz, running around, unstructured play is kind of like where you can develop a lot of the tendon stiffness, and we don't really realize that as well. That it's just free time in the yard, recess, lunchtime. Playing a game of basketball with your friends is really going to help develop that as well.
Handball, hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, down ball. I don't know what do the kids play these days.
Yeah.
And these sports, or these kind of like not extracurricular, but these just activities that are unstructured are going to help develop these qualities quite nicely. Obviously, the gym will help to do that because it's more specified and you're creating more parameters around that. But free play is probably really undervalued in that sense. And I know for us, dealing with the younger kids here, we're actually incorporating a bit more free play into their warm-ups to help drive these outcomes that we want to see in terms of just general athletic development.
Yeah. So back to the topic. So topics around like basically taking inspiration from our influencers and elite athletes. What sort of problems are we seeing with that?
I don't think we're seeing like huge problems, but I can see how parents might be wrapped up, or young athletes might be wrapped up. It's like, I need to be doing this because this person is doing this. Yeah. We haven't assessed whether or not, well, why are they doing that? And there's no context. And that's probably the biggest problem, is there's little to no context on social media. We're guilty of it and all that jazz, but we can actually explain why we implement certain things into certain programs. That's probably the number one problem that we see. There's little to no context or understanding why that exercise or exercise routine or workout has actually been implemented with the athletes. People will just kind of pick and choose because it looks good. Got to have a reason behind it.
From an influencer standpoint, or from like a TikTok famous person who's plugging a lot of exercise, they need stuff that looks cool. They need stuff that looks sexy, because that's what's going to get them views. That's what's going to get them paid.
It's how they make money.
So they're going to do like, bicep curl, blast balancing on a Bosu ball, doing a backflip and fireworks in the background, because that's going to get views. That's what's going to get them engagement. Whereas the best athletes have done the basics over and over again. They've mastered the basics. So then they're going to go to more extreme stuff in order to get like an nth of a percent gain in their performance. Whereas influencers is like just giving random exercises that have no real rationale behind it. Like they probably could give rationale, but in terms of a youth athlete development standpoint, you wouldn't give someone a level 50 exercise when they're starting at level 1.
Yeah, and you got to treat it like school. That's the way that we like to say it is, they've got to be able to show the general progressions of certain exercises. For some of the younger kids, if they're going to do a squat here, we start with a zombie squat to a bench or to a ball, depending on their mobility. As they start to build their confidence up and competency with it, we add in a weight. That weight could be just holding a plate out in front or holding a weight at the chest or something like that. And then do the same movement pattern. And we gradually load that up over time, whether it's through more reps, more sets, or more weight, or incorporating a bit of tempo. Then we'll end up doing that. Then what we can do is eventually they'll begin to have some understanding of their body awareness. We incorporate a bar, not a barbell, but we can actually change the actual squat itself by changing the implement that's been used. We might even change it to a kettlebell or something like that.
Yeah, and this is even more reason for, as a parent, like for your child to start early so that your child can nail the basics, so that when they're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, they're already doing like quite advanced stuff, because their training age is much higher than someone who's starting in the gym at 18, 19, 21 years old. But they've developed a really good sporting IQ, but they may not have the physical prowess, the strength, the power, the speed, and that's only going to be complemented in the gym.
Yeah, and look, if you actually ask these athletes, and now if anyone messaged Ash Barty, Naomi Osaka, probably Novak, good on you, Novak. If you actually message a lot of these athletes and say, how did you actually start in the weight room? A lot of them will say it's I started just squatting to a bench or a ball, or squatting with a weight, holding at the chest.
Ask any NFL superstar where they started. They probably started in middle school.
Yeah. And they said, we're going to start with just body weight exercises.
Body weight exercises.
We're going to teach you how to sprint properly. We're going to teach you, the start position. We're going to teach
how to jump, how to land.
Exactly. We're going to teach you how to change direction, how to cut efficiently, how to stay low. It's going to be the real basic stuff that a lot of people won't see.
Yeah.
That's not publicized.
Yeah, it's not sexy. It's not going to get the views, things like that.
Yeah, it's going to allow you to do all the fancy stuff later on down the track.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to add with that?
Nah. So I think as a parent, if your child is saying, "Oh, Dad, I want to do this exercise," that's really, really cool. My favorite AFL players or my favorite basketball players doing it. Maybe have in the back of your mind, they're quite an elite athlete. They probably have done years and years of training with a qualified coach to reach this level. And you have to ask yourself, what is this exercise actually doing? And is it achieving the goal that my son or my daughter is trying to achieve? And is there a better way of doing that with a different exercise?
Cool. That's it. Hopefully you got something out of today. Like we said, they're good. Again, they provide great motivation. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't knock it, but there's sometimes can be a lot of missing context to that as well. It's all they really say in their captions is "Oh, I had a really great session. We did this and this today." And I'm like, all right, where are they actually in their season?
Yeah, context matters. Matters.
It's huge. Context does matter. If you see something really fancy, actually just message us or even just tag us, and we can provide a bit of context as to why they might actually do it, or where do we think they are in their season and how it's actually going to help them move forward. I think that's probably the thing that's missing the most is the lack of context, but also the education around that as well. That's why for anyone who's looking to get their kids stronger, any parents out there, go see someone who's qualified, who's a youth fitness professional, a youth fitness specialist, someone who's actually helped kids actually get to that next phase. We've helped many kids, overcome injuries, issues, rehab, surgeries,
reach higher levels than they ever thought they could.
Yeah, PBs, it's kind of just crazy. We just go back to basics, just kind of simplify it down.
Nail the basics.
We simplify it down, provide some context. We actually teach and educate how these kids should move in a language they actually understand as well. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's we don't want to just press. We actually want to provide context as like, if your elbow is coming forward, we want your shoulder blade to be hugging your rib cage, because it's going to provide more stability when you're doing push-ups. So you're not going to be feeling it through the front of your shoulder.
Yeah, and then doing this push-up this way will help your sport, because you'll be able to do X, Y, Z in your sport.
Correct. Yeah. So, we could go on a tangent with that, but we'll wrap it up here. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Share this with anyone who follows people and tries to do like some fancy ass programs out there. Really, end of the day, do the basics. Find someone who can actually help you as you start to master the basics and get on top of the basics and load them up over time and progress them. You're going to be able to do fancier stuff, and that's where training can become really fun, and you have a lot more variety of what you can do, because you've kind of like surfed the wave in terms of progression.
Yeah.
Cool. See you later.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.